I will never forget that night. The table was full, everyone gathered to celebrate my son Ethan's supposed promotion at the company. The wine glasses sparkled under the dining room light, the dishes were steaming with freshly served food, and laughter filled the air. But I, sitting at the head of the table, had barely touched my plate, because I knew something was about to explode. And it did. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, stood up with a glass in her hand. She was wearing a champagne-colored dress that seemed to scream how much she had spent on it. Her smile was sharp, as if she were about to say something funny. But what came out of her mouth wasn't a joke. It was a stab. "I want to make a toast," she said, looking directly at me. "To my husband Ethan, the new director of operations at Consolidated Manufacturing, and also to Eleanor." She paused dramatically. The family's charity case. Silence fell like a ton of bricks. Everyone at the table stopped moving. My sister Carol's eyes went wide. Ethan's cousins exchanged uncomfortable glances, but Chloe just kept smiling. "Yes, yes, I say it with affection," she continued, walking around the table as if she owned the place. "But it's the truth. Eleanor lives on a miserable pension. She doesn't have a car. She doesn't own property. She can barely pay her rent. Meanwhile, my mother Barbara earns 10 times more than this woman earned in her entire life." I felt something break inside me. It wasn't the first time Chloe had humiliated me, but to do it like this, in front of the whole family to my face, crossed every line. I looked at Ethan, my son, the man I had raised alone, working double shifts, sacrificing everything. I expected him to say something, to stop her, to defend me. But Ethan just lowered his gaze to his plate, as if the vegetables were suddenly the most fascinating thing in the world. Coward. Chloe wasn't finished. She leaned over the table, bracing herself on her hands, looking at me with a mixture of feigned pity and real contempt. "You know what your problem is, Eleanor? You never knew how to seize opportunities. Your whole life working as a secretary in small-time companies, and now look at you, a retired old woman living on scraps." Someone coughed uncomfortably. Another looked away. But no one spoke. No one defended me. I clenched my fists under the table. I felt the blood boiling in my veins, but I kept my face serene. I wouldn't give them the pleasure of seeing me cry. I wouldn't give them the pleasure of seeing me scream, because there was something they didn't know, something no one at that table knew. And in that moment, as Chloe kept laughing and Ethan kept avoiding my gaze, I made a decision. This would not stand. "Oh, don't be like that," Chloe said, returning to her chair with a laugh. "I'm just telling the truth. Besides, Eleanor knows we love her. Right, mother-in-law?" She blew me a fake kiss. I wanted to vomit. Ethan finally looked up, but not at me. He looked at Chloe with a dopey smile, as if he were proud of her, as if humiliating his own mother was something admirable. Then he spoke, and his words were worse than hers. "My mom has always been modest," he said, in a tone that tried to sound diplomatic, but only sounded condescending. "She never had big ambitions. She settled for little. And that's fine. Not all of us can be successful." Successful. The word echoed in my head like a slap. Successful? This boy I had supported until he was 25 because he couldn't find a job? This man I got hired at Consolidated Manufacturing because I myself made a call? But they didn't know that. And in that moment I decided they wouldn't know. Not yet. Because revenge, true revenge, isn't served hot. It's served cold. Calculated. Perfect. So I just smiled. A small, calm smile, which seemed to confuse Chloe for a second. "You're right," I said in a soft voice. "I'm just a retired old woman. Unimportant. Powerless." I stood up slowly, folding my napkin carefully. "Enjoy your dinner. I'm leaving." I walked out of that house with my head held high. I heard Chloe laugh behind me, commenting on how I was just too sensitive. I heard Ethan mutter a weak excuse. But I didn't look back. Because I was already planning. I was already thinking. I was already preparing the moment when all that arrogance would collapse like a house of cards. And that moment would come soon. Very soon. I walked to the bus stop in the light rain of that evening. My old coat barely protected me from the cold. My worn-out shoes made a sound against the wet pavement. Anyone who saw me would think exactly what Chloe had said. A poor old woman, with nothing, with no one, invisible. And that was exactly the image I had cultivated for years. For reasons that neither Ethan nor Chloe could even imagine, I got on the bus and sat by the window. I looked at my reflection in the fogged-up glass. 67 years old, deep wrinkles around my eyes, hands rough from so much work. But behind those tired eyes was something they never saw. Strength, intelligence, and a secret that would change everything, because I was not who they thought I was. I never had been, and the time had come for them to find out. The bus moved slowly through the wet streets. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In my mind, I was already tracing every step, every move, every word I would say when the time came. Chloe had made a fatal mistake that night. She had underestimated me, and in this world, underestimating someone can cost you everything. Absolutely everything. When I got to my small apartment, I turned on the living room light. Everything was simple. Old furniture, bare walls, a narrow kitchen, exactly what you would expect from someone like me. But in the bottom drawer of my desk, locked away, there was an envelope. And inside that envelope were documents that were worth more than everything Chloe and Ethan had combined. Much more. I didn't open it that night. It wasn't necessary. I knew every word by heart, every figure, every legal detail, because those documents had been my life for 40 years, my secret, my silent power. And now, thanks to my daughter-in-law's arrogance and my son's cowardice, that power was about to be revealed. But not yet. First, I had to prepare. First, I had to make sure that when the hammer fell, there would be no escape. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my worn-out armchair. Outside, the rain beat against the window with a steady rhythm. And I smiled. A real smile this time, because they still didn't know who they had messed with, but they would soon find out, very soon. The following days were a silent torture. Chloe wasn't content with humiliating me just once. No, that dinner was only the beginning. Every family gathering became a stage for her venomous comments. "Oh, Eleanor, that coat again? If you want, I can give you one of my old ones," she would say in that syrupy voice she used to disguise her cruelty. Or even worse, mother-in-law, "Do you need money for the supermarket? Ethan and I make so much, we can help you out." And Ethan, my own son, would just nod his head like a trained dog. What hurt me most wasn't Chloe. It was him. It was seeing how the boy I had raised, the one I taught values, respect, dignity, was now standing there letting his wife trample all over me. Even worse, he participated. At my sister Carol's birthday party, Ethan told everyone he was the director of operations at Consolidated Manufacturing. He lied shamelessly. "I manage a $3 million annual budget," he said, puffing out his chest. "I have 50 people under me." Everyone congratulated him. They admired him. And I, sitting in a corner with a paper plate in my hands, just watched. Chloe added more lies on top. My mother Barbara is the chief financial officer of the same company. Between her, Ethan, and me, we practically run the whole place. She laughed, fixing her hair with a studied gesture. In fact, yesterday we had to make important decisions about layoffs. "It's so much responsibility." People nodded, impressed. Some asked for advice. Others wanted to know if there were any open positions. And the two of them just kept spinning their web of lies. Bigger, more elaborate, more ridiculous. But I knew the truth. Ethan wasn't the director of anything. He was a junior marketing manager, not even a full manager. Junior. He made $42,000 a year, which wasn't bad, but it definitely wasn't a director's salary. And Chloe was a mid-level sales manager. Competent, yes, but nothing exceptional. Barbara, her mother, did indeed have a higher position as CFO, but she also had a history that I knew very well, one that wouldn't hold up to much scrutiny. Every night I returned to my apartment with a heavy heart. I'd take off my shoes, make a simple dinner, and sit by the window, looking at the city. The building lights flickered in the distance like fallen stars. And I would think, plan, calculate, because I knew I couldn't act on impulse. One wrong move and everything would fall apart. It had to be perfect. It had to be final. One afternoon, while I was cleaning my small kitchen, the phone rang. It was my sister, Carol. Her voice sounded worried. "Eleanor, are you okay? Everyone is talking about what happened at the dinner. Some are saying Chloe went way over the line." I took a deep breath before answering. "I'm fine, Carol, don't worry." There was an awkward silence on the other end. "It's just, well, you know how the family is. A lot of them think Ethan has a point. That you were never very ambitious. That maybe that's why you are where you are." Those words hurt more than I expected. Not because of Carol, who was just being honest, but because they confirmed what I feared. Everyone saw me exactly as Chloe wanted them to. A failure, a burden, someone worthy of pity. You know what, Carol? You're right. I never was ambitious. I just did what I could with what I had. A lie. The biggest lie I had told in years. But it was necessary. "Well, if you need anything, call me," Carol said before hanging up. If she only knew. If she only knew. I couldn't sleep that night. I got up at 3 in the morning and walked to my desk. I opened the locked drawer. I took out the envelope. The documents inside were perfectly organized, just as I had always kept them. Property deeds, stock certificates, contracts, legal documents with official seals and notarized signatures. I ran my fingers over them slowly, feeling the weight of what they represented. 40 years of my life. 40 years of sacrifice, work, vision, and silence. Consolidated Manufacturing wasn't just a company where Ethan and Chloe worked. It was my creation. I founded it 40 years ago, when no one believed in me, when I was a young woman with a young son and no husband, when the banks slammed their doors in my face, when suppliers laughed at my proposals. I started with 2 industrial sewing machines in a rented garage. I worked 18 hours a day. I sewed, I sold, I delivered, I collected payments, all by myself. The company grew. Slowly at first, then faster. I hired employees. I opened a bigger plant. I landed contracts with department stores. In 10 years, Consolidated Manufacturing was one of the leading textile manufacturers in the region. But I made a decision back then, a decision that would change everything. I decided to disappear. Not physically, but legally. I structured the company through trusts and legal representatives. My name didn't appear on any public records. No one knew I was the owner. Why? For safety. For privacy. Because I had seen how successful businesswomen became targets. Of kidnappers. Of con artists. Of envious relatives. I wanted to live quietly. I wanted Ethan to grow up without pressure. Without being the millionaire's son. Without fake heirs sniffing around. So I created the perfect facade. The retired secretary with a modest pension. And it worked. For 40 years, it worked perfectly. Until now. Until my daughter-in-law's arrogance and my son's stupidity made that facade unnecessary. Because if they were going to treat me like trash, if they were going to lie about their positions in my company, if they were going to humiliate me using the success I built, then there was no point in hiding anymore. There was no point in protecting them from the truth. I put the documents away again. But this time, I didn't lock the drawer, because I would need them soon. The next morning, I woke up with absolute clarity. I knew exactly what to do. I called Javier Ruiz, my trusted lawyer for 30 years, the only one who knew the whole truth. "Javier, I need to schedule an extraordinary meeting of the board of directors at Consolidated Manufacturing." There was a surprised pause. "Mrs. Hayes? After all these years? Are you sure?" His voice was full of concern. "Completely," I replied firmly. "And I want it soon. This week, if possible." "May I ask the reason?" Javier said cautiously. "Internal matters that require my personal attention." "And Javier, I want all the managers present. All of them. Without exception." I heard him typing on his computer. "Understood. I'll coordinate it immediately." "Anything else?" I smiled as I looked out the window. "Yes. I want a complete report on the activities of 3 employees. Ethan Hayes, Chloe Reyes, and Barbara Torres. Financial movements, performance reviews. Everything. There was a significant silence. Javier was smart. He knew something big was about to happen. "I'll have it ready before the meeting," he said finally. "Mrs. Hayes, whatever you're planning, be careful." I let out a dry laugh. "Don't worry, Javier. I'm just going to remind a few people who I really am." I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. The gears were in motion. There was no turning back now. And honestly, I didn't want to turn back. They still didn't know who they had messed with. But they were about to find out. The next few days were a strange mix of anxiety and determination. While I waited for Javier to organize everything, life went on as normal. Or at least, what Ethan and Chloe considered normal. I got a call from my son on a Tuesday afternoon. "Mom, we're having a barbecue at the house on Saturday. Come if you want." His tone was casual, almost indifferent, as if inviting your mother was a chore you did for someone insignificant. "I'll be there," I replied simply. On the other end, I heard voices. Chloe was yelling something about not having enough chairs. Ethan yelled back at her to handle it. He hung up without saying goodbye. On Saturday, I arrived at their house with a container of potato salad. It was a nice house in an upper-middle-class subdivision. Nothing extraordinary, but presentable. Ethan had bought it with a bank loan that I knew he could barely afford. But of course, he told everyone he'd bought it with cash from his director bonuses. More lies. I rang the doorbell and Chloe opened the door. She was wearing a salmon-colored sundress and expensive sandals. She looked me up and down with that expression I knew so well, contempt disguised as politeness. "Oh, Eleanor, come on in. Just leave that in the kitchen. Not even a hello. Not a hug. Nothing." I went inside and found the house full of people. Ethan's co-workers, some of Chloe's friends, neighbors, everyone chatting, laughing, drinking beer. I made my way to the kitchen and left my salad on the counter. One of Chloe's friends was there, a woman named Megan with too much makeup and strong perfume. "You're the mother-in-law?" she asked with poorly disguised curiosity. "Yes, I am." Megan smiled with a mix of pity and amusement. "Oh, Chloe's told me about you. She says you're very humble. That word again. The polite code for poor, for failure, for insignificant." "That's right," I replied calmly. "Very humble." Megan nodded as if she were confirming something she already knew. "It's so good that Ethan and Chloe support you. Not everyone is that lucky." I wanted to laugh. Support me. If she only knew. If she knew that every mortgage payment on this house, every piece of furniture, every one of Chloe's expensive dresses, was all financed by salaries that came from my company. I went out to the backyard, where Ethan was grilling. Several men were gathered around him as he told another one of his fabricated stories. And so I told the general manager, "If we don't approve this strategy, we're going to lose the contract." And you know what? He listened to me. I saved a $2 million deal. The man whistled, impressed. One of them slapped him on the back. "You're a rock star, Ethan." My son beamed with pride, flipping ribs on the grill like he was a king in his castle. I approached slowly. "Hello, Ethan." He glanced at me out of the corner of his eye. "Oh, Mom, glad you could make it." His tone was the same you'd use for a distant cousin you hadn't seen in years. Cold, distant. One of his friends, a guy named Matt with a scruffy beard, looked at me curiously. "You're Ethan's mom. He told us you're retired." I nodded. "That's right. I worked for many years as a secretary. Now I live on my pension." Matt nodded with superficial sympathy. "Must be tough with pensions being so low these days." "I get by," I said quietly. Ethan changed the subject quickly, as if my presence made him uncomfortable. He started talking about a new project at the company. More lies. He claimed he was leading an expansion into international markets, that he had meetings with foreign investors, that he'd be vice president soon. I just listened silently, memorizing every lie, every exaggeration, every fabrication, because all of it would be useful very soon. Chloe came out to the yard with a pitcher of lemonade. She stood next to Ethan and wrapped her arm around his waist. "Honey, did you tell them about the meeting tomorrow?" Ethan nodded excitedly. "Yeah, we have a huge meeting with the board of directors. I'm finally going to meet the real owners of the company. I felt something stir in my chest, a mix of irony and anticipation, because he had no idea. He didn't have the slightest idea. The owners? Matt asked, intrigued. I thought you already knew them. No, Ethan replied with an air of importance. The real owners are very private. They handle everything through legal reps. No one's ever seen them. But apparently, they're showing up this week for the first time in years. Something about a special audit, Chloe added excitedly. It's the perfect opportunity for Ethan to shine. I'm sure after this meeting, they're going to offer him the vice presidency. They laughed together, imagining their brilliant future, a future that was about to collapse. I just smiled, a small smile that no one noticed, because the meeting they were talking about was my meeting, the one I had called, and they were going to be there. They were going to be sitting in that room when I walked in, when I revealed who I was, when their world of lies shattered right in front of their eyes. But it wasn't time to say anything yet. I still had to play my part. The poor grandmother, the insignificant mother, the retired old woman. I stayed at the barbecue for another couple of hours. I ate silently in a corner of the yard. No one came to talk to me except for polite questions. How's the weather? Want more lemonade? Nothing substantial. Nothing real. I was like old furniture in the corner, present but ignored. And that was fine. Because soon, very soon, I wouldn't be invisible anymore. Soon, everyone would have to look at me. They would have to listen to me. They would have to acknowledge what I had always been. When I left, Ethan barely raised his hand to say goodbye. Chloe didn't even come out of the kitchen. I walked to the bus stop under the afternoon sunday. My old purse hung from my shoulder. My worn-out shoes made the same sound as always against the pavement. An elderly woman waiting for public transport. Nothing special. Nothing memorable. But inside me, a fire was burning that they couldn't see. A fire of justice that was about to consume them. On Monday morning, I got the call from Javier. Mrs. Hayes, everything is set. The meeting is Wednesday at 10 in the morning. All managers will be present, including Ethan, Chloe, and Barbara. I also have the reports you requested. His voice was serious. And? I asked, though I already imagined the answer. Ethan has been inflating his sales reports. Nothing illegal, but definitely unethical. Chloe has some irregularities in handling commissions. And Barbara. He paused significantly. Barbara has major problems. What kind of problems? My voice was cold now. Professional, Javier sighed. She's been diverting small amounts of funds through inflated invoices. Not a lot. Maybe $50,000 in total over the last 2 years. But it's enough for a serious audit. I closed my eyes. So it was true. They weren't just arrogant, they were corrupt. Perfect, I said finally. Prepare all the documentation. And Javier, I want this to be flawless, no mistakes. No room for excuses. It will be, he promised. Mrs. Hayes, are you sure you want to do this? They are your son and daughter-in-law. I was silent for a moment. I thought of all the humiliations, all the lies, all the times they treated me like garbage. Precisely because they are my son and daughter-in-law, I need to do this. If I don't teach them now, they will never learn. Javier said nothing more. He knew my decision was made. I'll see you on Wednesday then. See you on Wednesday. I hung up the phone and sat in my old armchair. 2 days left. 48 hours until the moment that would change everything. 48 hours until the truth came out. 48 hours for Ethan and Chloe to find out who they had really messed with. And this time, there would be no going back. This time, justice would have the final say. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. The end game was near. Tuesday was the longest day of my life. Every minute dragged on, as if time itself was conspiring to torture me. I woke up early, before dawn, with my heart racing. I hadn't slept well. All night, I tossed and turned, mentally rehearsing what I would say, how I would say it, imagining Ethan's and Chloe's faces when they learned the truth. It was a strange mix of anticipation and something resembling fear. Not fear of them, but fear of the irreversible. Because after tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same. I made coffee and sat by the window. The city was just beginning to wake up. The first light of day painted the sky orange and pink. I thought about the last 40 years, about all the decisions I made, all the sacrifices. I remembered when Ethan was little, when I would wake up in the dark to make his breakfast before going to work. When I bought him new shoes for school while I wore mine until they fell apart. When I studied his homework with him even though I was exhausted after 14 hours at the factory. I did it all for love. Every extra hour, every difficult client, every risky loan to expand the company. I did it all thinking about giving him a better future, so he would have opportunities I never had. And it worked. Ethan graduated from college. He got a good job. He got married. But somewhere along the way, he forgot where he came from. He forgot who paid for that university, who made the connections to get him hired, who was the one who was always, always there. And now he treated me as if I were a burden, as if I were an embarrassment. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Carol again. "Eleanor, are you okay? I've been calling, but you're not answering." Her voice sounded worried. "I'm fine, Carol. Just thinking." There was a pause. "I heard there's going to be a big meeting at Consolidated Manufacturing tomorrow. Ethan is really excited. He says he's going to meet the real owners." I bit my lip to keep from laughing. "Yes, I heard that." Carol sighed. "I hope it goes well for him. You know how he is. He exaggerates sometimes, but deep down he's a good boy. A good boy." The question came out sharper than I intended. Carol fell silent. Carol, a good boy, doesn't let his wife humiliate his mother. A good boy doesn't lie about his life to impress strangers. A good boy isn't ashamed of where he comes from. I heard her take a deep breath on the other end. "Eleanor, I know Chloe crossed the line, but Ethan loves you. He's just trying to impress her. You know how young marriages are." I wanted to scream at her to stop making excuses for him, but I didn't. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just a little sensitive lately." After I hung up, I stared at the phone. Even Carol, my own sister, defended Ethan. Everyone defended him. Because that's how the world works. The successful are always right. The poor are always wrong. It doesn't matter what the truth is. It doesn't matter what justice is. It only matters who has more money, more power, more influence. Well, tomorrow that equation was going to change. Tomorrow everyone would see who really had the power, and it wouldn't be who they expected. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I took a suit from the back of my closet that I hadn't worn in years. It was pearl gray, elegant but understated. I sent it to the dry cleaners. I shined my dress shoes, the only good pair I had. I packed my leather briefcase, the one I had bought decades ago when I closed my first big contract. Inside, I placed copies of all the important documents: stock certificates, articles of incorporation, financial statements, audit reports. Everything perfectly organized in folders with dividers. Javier called in the afternoon to confirm the final details. "Mrs. Hayes, tomorrow at 10 o'clock sharp. The main conference room will be ready. The company's legal team will be present, along with the current board, the department managers, and, of course, Ethan, Chloe, and Barbara." He paused. "Do you want me to tell them beforehand who you are?" "No," I replied firmly. "I want it to be a surprise. A complete surprise." Javier let out a nervous laugh. "This is going to be historic. In my 30 years as a corporate lawyer, I've never seen anything like this." "Are the reports complete?" I asked, changing the subject. "Completely. I have documentation of every irregularity. Chloe's unreported commissions total approximately $32,000. Ethan's inflated reports, while not constituting fraud, show a clear pattern of professional dishonesty, and Barbara has serious problems. $53,000 in total, diverted through fake invoices. I have irrefutable proof." My heart sped up. Enough for termination with cause. More than enough. In Barbara's case, probably enough for legal action if you decide to take it. I breathed deeply. I didn't want to ruin lives. I just wanted justice. I just wanted them to understand that they couldn't trample on people without consequences. "Prepare everything. We'll decide what to do tomorrow." We hung up, and I sat in silence. Tomorrow. It would all happen tomorrow. There was no more time for doubt. There was no more room for regret. The die was cast. That evening, I tried to eat dinner but had no appetite. I made a light soup that I barely touched. My stomach was in knots. It wasn't nervousness, exactly. It was more the feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump without knowing exactly where I would land. I knew I was right. I knew they deserved this. But I also knew that after tomorrow, my relationship with Ethan would never be the same. Maybe he would never speak to me again. Maybe he would hate me forever. But then I remembered his face during that dinner. His cowardly silence as Chloe destroyed me with words. His stupid smile when she finished. The lies he told afterward. And the doubt evaporated. Because a son who can do that isn't a son. He's a stranger with your blood. And if I was going to lose him anyway, at least it would be on my own terms. At least it would be defending my dignity. At least it would be teaching him a lesson he clearly needed to learn. I went to bed early but couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw scenes from the past. Ethan, at 5 years old, crying because some kids made fun of him at school. Me hugging him, telling him to never let anyone make him feel small. Ethan at 15, helping me load boxes at the factory during his summer break. Ethan at 23, graduating from college, hugging me with tears in his eyes, thanking me for everything. Where did that boy go? At what point did he become this man I didn't recognize? At 3 in the morning, I got up. There was no point in trying to sleep. I made myself some chamomile tea and sat in the dark living room. The city lights glowed softly through the window. I thought about my mother, who died so many years ago. What would she say if she saw this? She was always so strong, so determined. She always taught me that a woman must stand up for herself, that no one will respect you if you don't respect yourself first. Mom, I whispered into the darkness, I hope I'm doing the right thing. The hours passed slowly. I watched the sky turn from black to gray, then to that pale pink of dawn. At 6 in the morning, I got in the shower. The hot water helped clear my head. I dressed carefully. The gray suit fit me perfectly. I combed my hair back into an elegant bun. I put on a little makeup, just what was necessary. Small pearl earrings. When I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. I wasn't the retired old woman in worn-out clothes. I was Eleanor Hayes, businesswoman, founder, owner. I ate breakfast slowly. Toast with jam, more tea. I checked my briefcase one last time. Everything was in order. At 9 in the morning, I left my apartment, but this time, I didn't take the bus. I called a cab. I gave the driver the address for Consolidated Manufacturing. The driver, an older man with a gray mustache, looked at me in the rearview mirror, going to the industrial park. I nodded. Yes, I have an important meeting. He smiled. You look very elegant, ma'am. I'm sure it'll go well for you, if he only knew. Thank you, I said simply. And as the cab moved through the city streets, I felt everything inside me calm down. There were no more doubts. There was no more fear. Just absolute clarity. Today was the day. Today, the truth would come out. The taxi stopped in front of the Consolidated Manufacturing building. It was a modern, 4-story building with a glass and steel facade. The company logo shone in silver letters above the main entrance. I had seen it hundreds of times in photographs, in reports, in documents, but never in person. I had never set foot in this building. For 40 years, I managed everything from the shadows, through phone calls, private video conferences, and meetings with Javier in his office. Today was the first time I would walk through those doors as what I really was. The owner. I paid the taxi driver and stood for a moment on the sidewalk. Employees were coming and going from the building. Some in business suits, others in production uniforms. No one gave me a second glance. I was just another older woman. Invisible. Irrelevant. I took a deep breath, adjusted my briefcase, and walked toward the entrance. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh. The lobby was impressive. White marble floors, dark wood-paneled walls. A large reception desk with the company logo lit up behind it. The receptionist, a young woman named Paige with perfectly styled hair, smiled at me professionally. Good morning. How can I help you? I'm here for the board of directors meeting. My name is Eleanor Hayes. The woman checked her computer, frowning slightly. I don't see you on the guest list, ma'am. Before I could answer, Javier appeared from the elevators. Mrs. Hayes, right on time. He approached quickly, his own briefcase in hand and a serious expression. Paige, he said to the receptionist. Mrs. Hayes is with me. She is today's special guest. Paige nodded, confused, but let us pass. Javier and I walked toward the elevators. Once inside, with the doors closed, he looked at me with concern. Are you sure about this? We can still cancel. We can handle all of this privately. I shook my head. No, Javier. It has to be this way. Public. In front of everyone. So there are no doubts. So there are no excuses. He sighed, resigned. As you wish. But prepare yourself. It's going to be intense. The elevator climbed slowly. Second floor? Third floor? Fourth floor? The doors opened. The hallway was long and quiet. Gray carpet, cream-colored walls with abstract paintings, office doors on both sides with nameplates indicating names and titles. We passed one that said Ethan Hayes, Junior Marketing Manager. It didn't say Director. It didn't say anything grand. Just Junior Manager. The truth, etched on a metal plate. We kept walking until we reached a set of double wooden doors at the end of the hall. Main conference room, the sign read. Javier stopped before opening them. Everyone is inside. The board members, the managers, the legal team. They're waiting. Ethan and Chloe? I asked. Inside. Barbara too. None of them know why they were specifically summoned. They just know it's an extraordinary meeting with the owners. Perfect. Javier pushed the doors open, and we walked in. The room was enormous. A long mahogany table dominated the center, surrounded by executive leather chairs. Huge windows showed the city stretching to the horizon. And around that table, they all were. 15 people in total. I recognized several from the photographs in the reports. The CEO, Gregory Stone, the head of human resources, the head of production, and there, on the left side, were them. Ethan, my son, dressed in a black suit that probably cost him 3 months' salary, red tie, hair slicked back with gel. He looked important, confident. Next to him was Chloe, in an emerald green business dress and heels that clicked against the floor. Her makeup was perfect. Her posture was that of someone who thought she owned the world. And on the other side of the table, Barbara, a woman in her 60s. Dyed brown hair, designer glasses, a serious expression, the corrupt CFO who had been stealing from my company. Everyone turned when we entered. The conversation stopped. Ethan looked at me with genuine surprise. Mom? What are you doing here? His tone was somewhere between confused and annoyed, as if my presence were an intrusion. Chloe looked me up and down with disbelief. Then she let out a nervous laugh. Mrs. Hayes, but why is she here? Barbara didn't even recognize me. To her, I was a stranger. Javier raised his hand for silence. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I know you have many questions. Mr. Ruiz Gregory, the CEO, interrupted. He was a man in his 50s with graying temples. You told us we would finally meet the owners of the company. Are they coming or not? Javier smiled slightly. They are already here. There was a murmur of confusion. Everyone looked at each other. Where? Someone asked. Javier stepped aside and gestured to me. Allow me to introduce Eleanor Hayes, founder and majority owner of Consolidated Manufacturing, owner of 75% of this company's shares. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. It was as if time itself had stopped. Everyone's eyes were fixed on me, some with shock, others with disbelief. Ethan's mouth was hanging open. Literally, Chloe had turned pale. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the shock on her face. Barbara had taken off her glasses, cleaning them nervously, as if she thought she'd seen wrong. I walked slowly to the head of the table. My footsteps echoed in the silence. I placed my briefcase on the table and opened it calmly. Good morning, I said, my voice firm and clear. As Mr. Ruiz said, my name is Eleanor Hayes. I founded this company 40 years ago. I have managed its operations ever since through legal representatives. But today, I decided to introduce myself in person for the first time. I took out a folder and slid it toward Gregory. Here are the documents proving my ownership. Stock certificates, articles of incorporation, everything duly notarized and registered. Gregory took the folder with trembling hands and began to review it. His eyes grew wider with every page. Ethan finally found his voice. This has to be a joke. Mom, what is going on? What is all this? I turned to look him directly in the eye. It's not a joke, Ethan. It's the truth. A truth you never bothered to find out because you were too busy inventing lies about your own life. His face went from confusion to anger. What are you talking about? Chloe shot to her feet. Wait. This can't be real. You're a retiree. You live in a tiny apartment. You ride the bus. You can't be the owner of this company. I smiled sadly. And why can't I be, Chloe? Because I don't dress like you? Because I don't show off my money? Because I chose to live with humility instead of arrogance? She fell silent, her mouth opening and closing without making a sound. I turned to everyone present. For 40 years, I built this company from scratch. I worked 18 hours a day. I sacrificed everything, my youth, my relationships, my comfort, all to create something lasting, something of value, and I succeeded. Consolidated Manufacturing generates $52 million annually. It employs 300 people. It's a leader in the textile sector. But, I continued, my voice turning colder, I have recently discovered some troubling things: irregularities, dishonesty, lies. I looked directly at Ethan. My own son, for example, has been telling his family and friends that he is the director of operations, that he manages million-dollar budgets, that he makes executive decisions. All false. He is a junior marketing manager. A respectable position, yes, but not what he pretends to be. Ethan sank into his chair. His face was red with shame. Some of the people present looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. Then I looked at Chloe. My daughter-in-law has been misappropriating sales commissions. $32,000 in 2 years. Reporting false numbers. Taking credit for sales she didn't make. Chloe stood up again. This time, in desperation. That's not true. I never. Javier intervened, sliding another folder onto the table. Here are the complete reports. Every transaction documented. Every irregularity flagged. Chloe took the folder with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the pages quickly, and with every passing second, her face grew whiter. Finally, I turned to Barbara. And you, Mrs. Torres, Chief Financial Officer, respected, trusted. I paused. Thief. She jumped to her feet. How dare you? I have worked here for 15 years with an impeccable record. $53,000, I said coolly, diverted through fake invoices over the last 2 years. We have every transaction, every inflated invoice, every suspicious transfer. Javier placed a third folder in front of her. Barbara opened it. And when she saw the contents, she collapsed back into her chair as if her legs had given out. The silence in that room was deafening. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. They just stared. At me, the old retiree, the poor sap, the one who rode the bus and wore old clothes, the one who now stood before them with all the power in the world in her hands. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruel satisfaction. It was simply justice. Cold, pure, inevitable. Ethan was the first to try to defend himself. He stood up with his hands raised, as if he could stop the inevitable. Mom, please, let me explain. I never wanted them to treat you like that, he protested, his voice rising. Chloe went too far, I admit it. But I love you, Mom. I've always loved you. I walked toward him slowly. I looked him in the eyes. Those eyes I had known since he was born. If you loved me, Ethan, you would have defended me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have lied about who you are. If you loved me, you wouldn't be here inflating reports to get bonuses you don't deserve. He took a step back, as if my words were physical blows. You just thought of yourself. I finished the sentence for him. Like always, I turned to Chloe, who was trembling in her chair. The emerald green dress that had looked so elegant minutes before now seemed like a cheap costume. Her makeup was starting to run from the tears she couldn't hold back. "Mrs. Hayes," she began, her voice cracking. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who you were. Ethan never told me. He always talked about you like—" She stopped, realizing that anything she said would only dig her deeper. "Like what?" I pressed. "Like a failure? Like someone to be ashamed of?" Chloe looked down. "I was just repeating what he said. I thought it was true. I thought you really were just a retired secretary. And that gave you the right to treat me the way you did?" My voice remained calm, but every word cut like a knife. To make fun of me? To humiliate me in front of the whole family? To call me a charity case? She was sobbing openly now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was horrible. But please, don't take away my job. I need it. We have debts. The house. The house you bought with money you earned from my company," I interrupted. "The expensive dresses you wear, paid for with a salary from my company. The life you show off, built on the success of my company. And this whole time, while you benefited from what I built, you treated me like I was nothing." Chloe buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook. Barbara, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. Her voice was hard, defensive. "Mrs. Hayes, I can explain the financial irregularities. They were accounting errors. Misunderstandings. Nothing intentional." I turned to her with a look that made her shrink back in her chair. "Misunderstandings? $53,000 is not a misunderstanding, Mrs. Torres. It is systematic theft. For 2 years, you took advantage of your position. You created fake invoices. You inflated numbers. You diverted funds. And the worst part is, you did it thinking no one would ever notice. That the invisible owners would never look at the details." Javier added from his position. "We have sufficient evidence to proceed legally, Mrs. Torres. In fact, we have already consulted with the district attorney." Barbara turned green. "No, you can't do that. I have a family. I have a reputation." "A reputation built on lies," I said flatly. I looked around the table. Gregory and the other members of the executive team were still in shock. Some were taking notes. Others just watched, probably relieved not to be on the wrong side of this confrontation. "Now," I continued, turning my attention to the whole room, "I have called this meeting not only to reveal my identity, but to make important decisions about the future of this company." I walked slowly around the table. For 40 years, I trusted the managers and directors of this company to act with integrity, to protect what we built. But it is clear that some have forgotten the fundamental values. Honesty, respect, responsibility. I stopped in front of Ethan. "Effective immediately. Ethan Hayes, you are fired for unethical conduct. Inflating reports, while not legal fraud, goes against our corporate values. You have 1 hour to clear out your desk and leave the building." "No," Ethan shouted. "You can't do this to me. I'm your son." I looked at him with deep sadness. "Precisely because you are my son, I should be able to trust you more than anyone. But you proved to me that I can't." I moved toward Chloe. "Chloe Reyes, you are also fired, effective immediately. Misappropriating commissions is grounds for termination with cause. There will be no severance. There will be no letter of recommendation." Chloe began to sob uncontrollably. "Please, please. I have debts. I can't lose this job. I'll do anything." "You should have thought of that before you stole," I replied without emotion. Finally, I stood in front of Barbara. "Mrs. Torres, your case is more serious. You will not only be fired, but we will be filing criminal charges. You have the right to hire an attorney. I suggest you do so quickly." Barbara staggered to her feet. "This is revenge. Personal revenge because my daughter made fun of you." I shook my head. "No, Mrs. Torres. This is justice. If you hadn't stolen, if you hadn't lied, if you hadn't been disrespectful, none of this would be happening." Javier approached with paperwork. The termination orders are here. I will sign as Mrs. Hayes's legal representative. Security will escort you from the building. As if on cue, 2 security guards entered the room. Ethan looked at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. I will never forgive you for this. His words hurt me, but I didn't change my expression. You can live without my forgiveness, Ethan. The question is whether you can live without your dignity. The guards approached the 3 of them. Chloe was crying hysterically. Barbara walked rigidly, her head high but her eyes filled with fear. And Ethan? Ethan just stared at me as if I were a stranger. As they were escorted to the door, Chloe turned around one last time. You are a cruel, evil old woman. You have no heart. I smiled sadly. No, Chloe. I just have a memory. A memory of every insult, every taunt, every humiliation. And unlike you, I have something more important. I have dignity. The doors closed behind them. Silence filled the room again. Everyone present was still in shock. Slowly, I returned to the head of the table and sat down. I folded my hands on top of my briefcase and looked at each person present. Now, I said firmly, let's talk about the future of this company. Because although today was painful, it was also necessary. And I want to ensure that consolidated manufacturing continues to grow, but this time with people of integrity. Honest people. People who understand that success without values is not success. It is just an illusion that, sooner or later, collapses. Gregory nodded slowly. The others did too. And for the first time in 40 years, I felt completely visible, completely present, completely in control. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. We talked about restructuring, about new transparency policies, about quarterly audits. Gregory, the CEO, turned out to be more competent than I thought. He had been managing the company well without even knowing who the real owner was. I offered him to continue in his position with a raise and more autonomy. He accepted gratefully, though he was still processing the shock of the revelation. The other managers also showed professionalism. They asked intelligent questions. They presented ideas. They adapted quickly to the new reality. When the meeting finally ended, everyone left except for Javier and me. The room fell silent. The folders of evidence were still scattered on the mahogany table, half-empty water glasses, the chairs slightly out of place, all testimony to what had just happened. I sank into my chair with a long, deep sigh. I hadn't realized how tense I had been. Every muscle in my body ached. Javier sat down next to me. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted. Empty, sad, relieved, all at the same time. He nodded understandingly. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Hayes. What happened today was difficult, but necessary." I rubbed my temples. A headache was starting to form. "I'm still his mother, Javier. I just destroyed my own son's career. What kind of mother does that?" Javier looked at me with those wise eyes that had seen so many legal battles. A mother who understands that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. A mother who knows that consequences teach what words could not. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Javier took another document from his briefcase. "There's one more thing we need to discuss. The media. This story is going to get out. The mysterious owner of Consolidated Manufacturing revealing herself after 40 years, firing her own son. It's going to make headlines." I groaned. I hadn't thought of that. "What do you suggest?" "Prepare a press release. Control the narrative before the rumors get out of control. I can handle it if you'd like." I nodded gratefully. "Please do, but keep it professional. I don't want this to turn into a circus." Javier took notes. "And Ethan? Chloe? They're going to talk to the media. They're going to tell their side." "Let them talk," I said wearily. "The truth is documented. The facts don't change just because they invent stories." He closed his notebook. "Do you want me to take you home?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I want to walk through the company. I want to see with my own eyes what I built. I've never been here physically. I think I owe myself that." Javier smiled. "Of course. Would you like me to accompany you?" "No. I want to do it alone." I left the conference room and walked down the 4th-floor hallways. Offices on both sides. Executives working at computers. Phones ringing. People gathered, discussing projects. No one paid any attention to me. I was just an older woman walking by. I took the elevator down to the 3rd floor. Human resources. Accounting. More offices. More people working. 2nd floor. Sales. Marketing. I saw Ethan's empty cubicle. His desk still had photographs. One of him and Chloe at their wedding. Another on a beach vacation. A picture frame with a photo of me from years ago. I picked it up. It was from his college graduation. I was beside him, hugging him, with a huge smile. Both of us so happy. What happened to those 2 people? I put the frame back where it was and kept walking. 1st floor. The production plant. It was different here. The noise of industrial sewing machines filled the air. Dozens of workers, mostly women, operated equipment with expert precision. Bolts of colorful fabric passed through their hands, turning into garments. This was the heart of the company. This was what I had built. I approached one of the workers. She was a woman in her 40s with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Excuse me?" I said, getting closer. She looked up, surprised. "Yes, ma'am? How long have you worked here?" The woman smiled. 12 years. I started as an apprentice, and now I'm a line supervisor. I felt something warm in my chest. "Do you like your job?" "I love it. It's a good company. They pay well. They have good benefits. My kids have been able to go to school because of this job." Her words filled me with a deep satisfaction. "I'm glad to hear that," I said sincerely. She looked at me curiously. "Are you new here?" I smiled. "Something like that. I'm just getting to know the place." "Well, welcome." I left the production floor with tears in my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pride. Because at the end of the day, this was what mattered. Not the fake titles, not the expensive dresses, not the lies to impress others. What mattered was that 300 families had a stable income thanks to what I built, that children could go to school, that mothers could feed their kids. That was true success. That was the real legacy. I returned to the main lobby. Paige, the receptionist, saw me and smiled shyly. She had probably already heard who I was. "Mrs. Hayes," she said respectfully. "Do you need anything?" "No, thank you, Paige. Just thank you for keeping this place looking so beautiful." She blushed. "It's my job, ma'am. And you do it very well." I walked out of the building. The afternoon sun hit my face. It was later than I thought. Almost 4 o'clock. I had spent 6 hours inside that building. 6 hours that changed everything. I walked toward the street to hail a cab when my phone rang. It was Carol. Of course it was Carol. News travels fast. I answered, bracing myself for the worst. "Hello. Eleanor. Is it true?" Her voice was a mix of shock and hysteria. "Is it true you're the owner of Consolidated Manufacturing? Ethan just called me, crying. He said you fired him, that you humiliated him in front of everyone." I took a deep breath. "It's true, Carol. It's all true." There was a silence. "But why did you never tell us? Why did you live like what? Like a poor person?" I finished. "Because I wanted peace, Carol. I wanted privacy. I wanted Ethan to grow up normal, without pressure. But you fired him. He's your son." Her voice went up an octave. "I fired him because he was claiming credibility he didn't deserve. Because he inflated numbers. Because he let his wife humiliate me while he stood by silently." My voice was firm now. "I gave him everything, Carol. Everything. And he paid me back with shame and lies." I heard sobbing on the other end. "The family is divided, Eleanor. Some say you did the right thing. Others say you're cruel. That how could you do that to your own son?" "Let them think whatever they want," I replied, tired. "I know what I did and why I did it. And I can sleep at night with that. Ethan says he'll never forgive you." Carol's words hurt, but I expected them. I know, and maybe that's for the best. Maybe he needs time away from me to understand what he did wrong. Carol sighed. "I don't know what to say, Eleanor. This is too much, too big, too complicated." "I know," I admitted. "But it's done. There's no turning back. And now what? Are you going to keep living in that tiny apartment? Are you going to keep riding the bus? I smiled, in spite of everything. I don't know. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. I have to think about it. We said our goodbyes and I hung up. A taxi pulled up in front of me. I got in and gave my address. The driver, a different one from this morning, turned on the radio. The news was talking about the weather, traffic, politics. Nothing about me, yet, but they would, soon. I looked out the window as the city passed by. Buildings, people, life, going on as always, as if my world hadn't just completely changed. And maybe that was the lesson, that the world keeps spinning, regardless of our personal dramas, that we are only important to ourselves, that in the end, all that's left is how we live with our decisions. The taxi dropped me off in front of my building. I climbed the stairs slowly. My legs protested. My back ached. I opened the door to my apartment, and everything was exactly as I had left it that morning. Small. Simple. Mine. I took off my shoes. I let my hair down. I made myself a cup of tea, and I sat by the window, just as I had 1,000 times before. But this time was different. This time, I had no more secrets. This time, the world knew who I was. And strangely, that made me feel lighter, as if a 40-year weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. The following days were a whirlwind. The story exploded in the local media. Secretive businesswoman reveals identity after 40 years. Textile magnate fires her own son for corruption. The invisible woman who built an empire. The headlines varied, but they all told versions of the same story. Some painted me as a hero, others as a heartless villain. I didn't care. I had learned a long time ago that you can't control what people think of you. You can only control who you really are. My phone rang off the hook, reporters wanting interviews, distant relatives crawling out of the woodwork asking how I was, old acquaintances suddenly remembering our friendship. I ignored almost all the calls. I only answered for Javier, who was handling the legal aspects, and for Carol, because despite everything, she was my sister. She came by almost every day, bringing food, sitting with me in silence when words weren't enough. She didn't always agree with what I did, but she was there. That's what mattered. 1 week after the incident, I received a letter. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Ethan. With trembling hands, I opened it. "Mom," it began, "I don't know where to start. I'm angry. I'm ashamed. I'm confused. You took everything from me. My job, my reputation, my dignity. People look at me differently now. Some with pity, others with scorn. Chloe has been blaming me for everything. She says it's my fault she lost her job. She says we never should have gotten married. Our relationship is destroyed." I kept reading. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that when I think about everything that happened, I can't help but wonder if you were right. If I became someone I don't recognize. Someone who lies. Who boasts. Who lets others humiliate his own mother. I don't know when it happened. I don't know at what point I stopped being the son you raised. But it happened. And now I don't know how to fix it. Tears began to fall onto my cheeks. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry I failed you. I'm sorry I embarrassed you. I'm sorry I wasn't the son you deserved. Ethan. I folded the letter slowly. My heart was a chaos of emotions. Part of me wanted to run to him, to hug him, to tell him everything would be okay. But the other part, the part that had been humiliated and trampled, reminded me why I did what I did. Because love without boundaries isn't love, it's enabling. And I couldn't enable his self-destruction. I put the letter in my desk drawer. I didn't answer it. Not yet. First, he needed to learn to live with the consequences. He needed to hit rock bottom so he could rebuild himself. The weeks passed. The media attention gradually faded. Other stories took my place in the headlines. Life went on. I started going to the company regularly. At first, it caused a stir every time I showed up. The employees looked at me with a mix of respect and curiosity. But eventually, they got used to me. I became part of the daily landscape. Mrs. Hayes, who walked the production floors, who sat in the break room with the workers, who asked about their families, who listened to their concerns. We implemented important changes. We raised wages. We improved benefits. We created training programs. The company didn't just survive the scandal, it thrived. The employees worked with more motivation, knowing the owner wasn't some cold corporation, but a woman who understood the value of honest work. Sales increased. Clients trusted us more. And I could finally see with my own eyes the fruit of 40 years of effort. It wasn't just numbers and reports. It was real people, with real lives that were improving because of decisions I made. One day, 3 months after the revelation, I was in my new office. I had decided to set up permanently at the company. The office was spacious, but not opulent. A simple wooden desk, a large window overlooking the city, photographs of the factory in its early days hanging on the walls. I was reviewing some contracts when Paige called from reception. "Mrs. Hayes, there's someone here who wants to see you. She says it's urgent." "Who is it?" I asked. There was a pause. "Chloe Reyes." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen Chloe since that day. "Send her up." Minutes later, the door opened, and I almost didn't recognize her. The arrogant woman in the emerald green dress was gone. In her place was a gaunt person, no makeup, deep dark circles under her eyes, unkempt hair, simple wrinkled clothes. She looked years older. "Mrs. Hayes," she said in a hoarse voice, "thank you for seeing me." I gestured to a chair. She sat down slowly, as if every movement hurt. "What do you need, Chloe?" She took a deep breath. "I came to apologize. I know I have no right. I know you probably hate me, but I needed to tell you in person. I was horrible to you, cruel, arrogant. I said unforgivable things. I did unforgivable things." Her eyes filled with tears. "And now I'm paying for it. Ethan and I separated. I can't find a job because no one wants to hire someone fired for theft. I had to sell the house. I'm living with my mother, who also can't find work for obvious reasons. My life has completely fallen apart. And you're here to ask for pity?" I asked, without emotion. "No," she replied quickly. "I'm not here to ask for anything, only to say that I'm sorry, that you were right, that you deserved respect, that I never should have treated you the way I did." She wiped the tears with the back of her hand. "I grew up poor, you know. My family never had anything. When I got this job, when I started making good money, I went crazy. I wanted to have everything I never had. I wanted to be someone important, and in the process, I turned into a monster." "That doesn't justify what you did," I said firmly. "I know," she admitted. "I'm not justifying anything. I'm just trying to explain. And maybe, just maybe, learn from this." We sat in silence for a moment. I looked at this broken woman in front of me. Part of me felt satisfaction seeing how far she had fallen, but another part, a larger part, just felt sadness. Sadness for the waste, for the lost opportunities, for how arrogance destroys people from the inside out. "What are you going to do now?" I finally asked. She shrugged. "Look for work. Any work. Rebuild my life from scratch. Learn true humility, not the fake kind." "And Ethan?" The mention of his name made something twist in my chest. Chloe sighed. "He's struggling too. He got a job at a small company, makes a fraction of what he used to. Lives in a tiny apartment, but I think it's doing him good. It's forcing him to grow up, to mature. Is he still angry with me?" I couldn't help but ask. She shook her head. "Not anymore. Now he's just sad. He says he understands why you did it, that he deserved it, but that he misses talking to you. He misses his mom." The tears threatened to come, but I held them back. "Maybe someday we can talk, but not today. Not yet." Chloe nodded, understanding. "I get it. I just wanted you to know that he has changed, that he's trying to be a better person. And I am too." She stood up slowly. "Thank you for listening to me, Mrs. Hayes. You didn't have to." "No," I admitted. "But I wanted to. Because despite everything, I believe people can change if they really want to. She smiled sadly. I hope you're right. When Chloe left, I sat in my office for a long time, looking out the window, thinking about everything that had happened, about the decisions I made, about the consequences they triggered. Did I do the right thing? I still wasn't completely sure. But I did know one thing. I knew that I stood up for myself when no one else would. I knew that I set boundaries when it was necessary. I knew that I taught a hard but important lesson. And I knew that, despite the pain, I could live with myself. That had to be enough. 6 months after that day that changed everything, my life had found a new rhythm. I no longer lived in the small apartment. I moved to a modest but comfortable house on the outskirts of the city. Nothing flashy. I didn't need to impress anyone. I had a garden where I grew tomatoes and herbs, a study where I read in the afternoons, and a peace I hadn't felt in years. The company continued to grow. Gregory turned out to be an exceptional CEO. Together, we implemented changes that transformed not only the numbers, but the entire culture of consolidated manufacturing. One Saturday afternoon, I was pruning the roses in the garden when I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting visitors. Carol had gone on a trip with her husband. Javier never came by unannounced. I took off my gardening gloves and went to open the door. On the other side stood Ethan, my son. He looked different, thinner, more serious. He was wearing jeans and a simple shirt. None of the expensive suits from before. He was holding flowers in one hand, yellow roses. My favorite. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice trembling. "Ethan." My voice came out softer than I expected. "Can I come in?" he asked cautiously. I nodded and stepped aside. He entered slowly, looking around. Nice house. Simple. Like you. It wasn't an insult this time. It was a compliment. "Thank you." We sat in the living room. An awkward silence filled the space between us. He looked at the flowers in his hands. I looked at my hands in my lap. Finally, he spoke. "I haven't stopped thinking about what happened. Every day, every night, I replay it all in my mind. The things I said, the things I allowed, the lies I told. Ethan," I started, but he held up his hand. "Please, let me finish. I've practiced this 1,000 times. He took a deep breath. "I was a coward, a liar, a bad son. I failed you in every way possible. And the worst part is, I did it consciously. I knew Chloe was humiliating you, and I did nothing. I knew I was inflating my reports, and I didn't care. I knew I was living a lie, and I preferred it to the truth." His eyes filled with tears. Because the lie was more comfortable. The lie made me feel important, successful, admired. "But the truth," he continued, his voice breaking, "the truth is that I was nothing without you. Everything I had, everything I was, came from your sacrifice, your work, your vision. And instead of being proud of that, I was ashamed. I was ashamed of you because you didn't fit the image I wanted to project. And that makes me the worst kind of person." Tears were streaming freely down his face now. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to welcome me back into your life. I just needed you to know that I get it, that I understand everything." I got up and walked to the window. I couldn't look at him. If I looked at him, my resolve would break. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It wasn't Chloe's insults. It wasn't the lies. It was your silence. It was watching the boy I raised, the one I taught to defend the weak, stand by silently while they destroyed me. That silence broke my heart more than any cruel word." I heard him sobbing behind me. "I know. And I have no excuse. There's no justification for that." I turned to look at him. This 35-year-old man, crying like a child. And for the first time in months, I didn't see the arrogant executive. I saw my son, the little boy who used to hug me when he had nightmares. The teenager who helped me at the factory. The young man who promised he would make me proud. "The last 6 months have been the hardest of my life," he said, wiping his tears. "I lost my job, my marriage, my house, my reputation. But you know what I gained?" He looked at me directly. "I gained perspective. I gained humility. I gained honesty. I work at a small company now as a marketing assistant. I make $1,200 a month. I live in a one-bedroom apartment. I wear second-hand clothes. And for the first time in years, I can sleep at night. Because I'm not lying. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm just Ethan. And that's enough. His sincerity cut through me. Every word sounded real. Honest. Without the layers of falsehood he used to wear. "Chloe?" I asked. She moved to another city. We divorced 2 months ago. It was for the best. We were toxic together. We fed into the worst parts of each other. I walked slowly toward him and sat down beside him. "Why did you come today, Ethan?" He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Because it's your birthday. 68 years old. And I realized that for your last 3 birthdays, I didn't even call you. I was too busy with my fake life. And I don't want to be that person anymore. I had forgotten it was my birthday. With everything that had happened, dates had lost their importance. These flowers," he said, holding them out to me. "I bought them with my own money. It's not an expensive bouquet like the ones Chloe used to buy to impress people. But they're from the heart. They're real." I took the flowers. The yellow roses smelled beautiful. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me today," Ethan said. "Or tomorrow. Or maybe ever. But if, someday, you could give me a chance to show you that I've changed, that I've learned, that I've grown, that would be the greatest gift of my life." I looked at him for a long time, searching for any sign of manipulation, of falsehood, but I only saw genuine pain, real remorse, true growth. "Forgiveness isn't something you give all at once," I said finally. "It's something you build, day by day, with actions, not words." "I know," he nodded, "and I'm willing to work for it, for as long as it takes." I got up and went to the kitchen. I put the flowers in a vase with water. I made 2 cups of coffee. When I returned, Ethan was still in the same spot, waiting. I offered him a cup. "Stay for dinner," I said simply. His face lit up. "Really? It doesn't mean everything is forgiven. It doesn't mean we'll go back to being what we were. But it means I'm willing to try." Little by little. He stood up and hugged me. A long, desperate hug, full of all the feelings that words couldn't express. That night, we cooked together. Something simple. Pasta with tomato sauce, a salad, bread. We talked about his new job, about my life at the company, about Carol and her trip, about everything and nothing. And for the first time in years, it felt normal, real, honest. When he left that night, he hugged me again at the door. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Mom. I won't waste it." "You'd better not," I said with a small smile. I watched him drive away in his old car. A 10-year-old model, full of dents. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. In the following months, Ethan came to visit regularly. Sometimes just for coffee. Other times to help me in the garden. He never asked for money. He never asked for favors. He just wanted to be present, to rebuild what he had broken. And slowly, very slowly, the wound began to heal. We never went back to being exactly what we were before. Some things, once broken, can't be fully repaired. But we built something new, something stronger, based on honesty, respect, and clear boundaries. A year after the revelation, I was sitting in the same garden, pruning the same roses. The company was doing better than ever. Ethan had been promoted at his new job for his work ethic and dedication. Carol and I talked every week. And I, finally, was living in peace. Not the peace of ignorance, but the peace of someone who fought for her dignity and won. I smiled, looking up at the blue sky. Some people only learn when they lose everything. Others never learn at all. But a rare few have the courage to look at their mistakes, accept the consequences, and choose to grow. Ethan, it turned out, was one of the few. And that, in the end, was all a mother could ask for. Justice isn't revenge. It's simply the quiet after the storm. And in that quiet, finally, we learn who we really are.